And in today's two-part episode, I sit down with the outstanding Kristin White. She hails from Bermuda. She is an entrepreneur, an activist, a philanthropist, and a family woman. We actually discuss everything from Bermudian culture, history, politics, and the cultural landscape of what it's like to be Black and from Bermuda. I hope you enjoy. Wow, that's powerful. That's really powerful. I mean, and that's the thing. Like for me, the biggest goal is us to see that that they always say strength in numbers, right? And so we don't even realize how big our numbers really are. That there has been a struggle. That there is an experience in Bermuda, the same as if we're talking about Mississippi, if we're talking about Minnesota, whatever the case may be. So and like you said, the millions that will never maybe touch down in Bermuda, they're still not left alone.
Exactly. I there's lots of places that I maybe will never visit, but I have an appreciation for their history, their culture, the role that they've played in world events. And that's something that up to this point, I don't think has been the case for Bermuda. The messaging about Bermuda, globally is very tourism based, and it's very much about, come and experience the beauty and the pink sand and come to this paradise. And that is important too. And that's a part of my messaging as a tourism professional too. Mm-hmm. And there is more to us than that. And so we want people that do come to the island to be able to tap into that so much more than that. Mm-hmm. And people that might never come, but will pick up a novel, a historical fiction novel rooted in, Bermuda's civil rights movement. And we actually have a young adult novel called Girl Caught, which is based during that time of Bermuda's civil rights movement, of the theater boycott, written by a local elder who was actually a part of leading the theater boycott back in 1959. And she was my librarian and English teacher here, but it was on one of Oprah's top books recently. And wow. So that's where yes, that's what we need, because someone will now pick up this book and be like, oh my goodness, the theater boycott, Bermudians did this, and that's how they desegregated their island, and it led to this and this, and that was part of this civil rights movement. Mm-hmm. And they'll be able to see, and then maybe from that they may even decide to come visit. So it all should be working together, yeah. People seeing Bermuda on the screen, in books, and maybe that encourages them to want to visit as well,
Right. No, wow, that's powerful. I mean, that's always my goal too, is for us to have Black travel is a thing, and it deserves more, and it deserves more praise than it's currently getting. It deserves a lot more energy than it's getting as well. And because Black travel is such a leader in tourism, my goal is to have more Black travel, excursions and trips and scavenger hunts to countries like Bermuda, where that not only there's a wealth of Black culture, but there's also a community base such as yourself that will explain and break it down and welcome and, and influence and encourage and empower. Because I can just imagine, I mean, for me personally, I must say, hearing this, like I said, mind blown is an understatement, but I'm learning a lot and I'm growing a lot. And I'm also, I want to say feeling dang, okay, cool, I'm not alone. Right. All right, cool. Yeah. We in this together.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's, that for me has been a part of it too, is how are we connecting Black travel groups, the Black travel movements as well, so just as as one girl, I'm always reaching out to Black travel groups and being like, yo, I see you do trips, please hit me up if you want to bring a group to Bermuda. Mm-hmm. It's definitely right now I feel like the Black travel movement is burgeoning, and some of it is very siloed, and that's fine because it's business and people want to keep their business to their chest. But I think there is energy as well in collaboration. Yes. So I'm excited to do more of that for sure. Like I said, I have a group coming with No Madness Travel is coming in next year, May. Hopefully we'll have a couple more Black travel groups putting Bermuda, on their radar for 2021, 2020, 2022 and beyond. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's positive. I feel optimistic about where Black travel is going in Bermuda. I don't know with who you spoke to in Bermuda tourism, but I don't know if they gave you the statistics about currently how many African Americans visit Bermuda. But it's 4% of our 4% of our air arrivals are African Americans. So
Really?
only 4%. Yes, we get also African American visitors on cruise, but because our growth market is air, that's the focus for tourism. And yeah, so the goal is to double that number by 2025, so that 8% of our air arrivals are African American. And so I'm hoping to be part of that number, of being a part of growing that number, by curating trips that are rooted in Bermuda history, culture, storytelling, and in the experience of us as people of African descent that have been a part of this island and continue to be the heart and soul of the island.
Absolutely. No, that's powerful. So that's our goal, 8%. So
8%.
Taking it up. That's too unachievable. I think we can get there.
It seems reasonable. Right. Hey, Pop.
Yeah, this is Duma.
Hey, my dog is upstairs whining because I had to put her out because of the work that was being done. So I'm gonna take her for a nice walk in a bit. Hey, Doma.
Say hi. Oh my God.
But yeah, I mean, so, and you do trips as well.
We do. So primarily Carnival, but now we're expanding into the Black travel, like the full array of Black travel outside of Carnival, right? So like I mentioned before, we want to do trips to Bermuda in terms of the scavenger hunt. So Fool's Gold as a brand, we're going to lead our own trips pretty much throughout the Caribbean and Africa, and then start to lead tours and trips throughout the US and in South America and things of that nature. Because first we wanted to start in a place where we wanted to go home first, right? So we wanted to be in the Caribbean, in Africa, understand heritage and roots, and you know what I mean, get it home first. And then now we can start to identify ourselves all over the globe as it pertains to like our impact and our global leadership and our relevance too, right? Because one of the things that, even as you were talking, it reminded me that, just over the last few years, all of the movements and everything that we saw on TV, where there were riots in Brazil, there were protests in different parts of the world, Europe, so on and so forth. And at the time I was teaching, I had students asking me like, man, why are they rioting over there? Why are they? And I had to remind them, like, this experience isn't limited to.
Yeah, it's a universal experience, you know, and it manifests in different ways. And I think, that was a part of the conversation that we had here with Social Justice Bermuda, because we led a few marches, and then another group led a really large march that was mainly about like showing solidarity with the global movement. And that was an incredible march that they led. And that was a group of young Black Bermudian women, and about 8,000 people marched in Bermuda. So, I mean, we're only 60,000 people. So thinking about the percentage of our population that took to the streets. But what we also saw was that people are very comfortable marching and, and adding their voice to something that's happening over there. Mm-hmm. But when you want to say, okay, yes, we need to march in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement in America, and call for an end to police brutality in America and other parts of the world where that's how racism is manifesting as well, mm-hmm. But there are also ways that racism manifests here. And I think, people were less comfortable having that conversation. So they were very comfortable marching and being like, yes, we're marching, and we're marching justice for George Floyd, justice for Breonna Taylor. But when we said, okay, well, here, this mm-hmm. is how racism manifests here, and this is what we want to be addressing here, people were less comfortable with that, So it was really interesting, because a lot of times, people are not able to actually see what's happening in their own backyard, and they'll say, oh, life for Black people in Bermuda, like, you're not being shot by the police here, you're not being this here, mm-hmm. and are not able to shift the perspective. So that was really interesting for us, for Social Justice Bermuda, of saying like, okay, people will not really be able to necessarily see that these platform positions are also tied into the Black Lives Matter movement. Yeah. There was a lot of pushback on some of the things that we put forward, and saying, we're inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement. And they're like, well, this doesn't have anything to do with that. And it's like, it all is. It's like, it's a part of a global experience, a universal experience of anti-Blackness, of colonialism, and this is how it manifests here. So that's something interesting, I think, as well, especially for younger minds to wrap their heads around, is like, okay, it's happening around the globe, but it looks differently in each place.
Right. You know what? Here's a question for you. Do you think if, say, for example, from the States, if it was almost like a reverse effect, if you have more people from the States chiming in or supporting efforts in Bermuda, that more Bermudians would feel comfortable about speaking up against issues that are happening at home?
Maybe. I'm not sure. That's a good question. I mean, I think, Social Justice Bermuda, once we formed, we were invited to join a number of different round tables that were a part of, like, okay, on a call will be someone from the Caribbean, another island in the Caribbean, someone from, New York, Nigeria, and we were having these round table discussions. And, it was definitely good from an organizer standpoint to sort of understand the messaging and to see where messaging aligned and where it had to be different just based on the fact that the circumstances were different. But we never, I don't think, really put that forward to the community. It was like, this is something that we're engaging in as organizers, but we didn't really bring those voices to the wider community. Something to think about. We definitely, in looking at different platform documents that were being put out by, community organizers in other states and cities, a lot of the messaging was aligned, around healthcare, ensuring there's mental health support for communities instead of criminalization of these issues. So a lot of them are the same. And we did speak to that for sure, but I think, perhaps having one of those voices here in Bermuda would have created more of an energy and a movement. I'm not sure. At this stage where we are, is that it's like, the powers that be, I think it's hard because we're also in a pandemic, and that is a priority, and we're trying to save lives, from the pandemic. So it's been hard. I think a lot of organizers, not just here, but around, have found it difficult to try to make movement on longer term goals, because the short term, the acute situation is so much of an issue. So that's been part of where we are. There's almost like fatigue on the part of listeners. Like the conversation, the oxygen in the room has been taken up with to vaccine, or to vaccinate or not to vaccinate, this mask, and any longer term conversation around criminal justice reform, healthcare, it has sort of unfortunately taken almost a back seat right now. And we're trying to regroup and reposition. But when we do that, maybe having a voice from an activist from overseas would be helpful.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, I always feel like there's, like I said earlier, there's strength in numbers. I mean, and to be honest with you, I feel like, we have kind of, again, due to the pandemic, we've kind of shifted focus from, and, although the violence or the craziness doesn't stop over here, we're still very focused on the pandemic. And we're in an awkward ground as though, do we take time, effort, and energy away from the pandemic to talk about this? Or, because you don't want to offend anybody at the same time.
And there's only so much capacity that people have, and everyone's exhausted, like everyone's worried, anxious, dealing, like, so it's hard to then be like, okay, well, yes, I know all of that is going on, and you have, food insecurity and income insecurity, and and also, like, can you pay some attention over here to this health bill that this health policy?
Right.
It's hard to know. you know, and I fear for you know, the burnout of organizers too, who are as well, like we're sitting here constantly, you know, not so much us, but thinking about the organizers overseas, who they're sitting there and they're working, their minds are still heavily entrenched in these issues that are still massive issues. And also you have to deal with your own life in a pandemic, you know, it's a lot. So I understand there being fatigue on all sides for, you know, there was movement, and I don't think that we will lose the momentum. I think we just need to sort of regroup and think about what it looks like next, you know?
Right. I agree. That's, we're in the same boat. I mean, and similar to you as well, we had pandemic, we have social justice issues, and we had an election all at the same time.
Right. We had an election too. We had an election in October of 2020. We had a snap election. So yeah, it's like managing all of that. You're managing the politics, your health, both your physical health and your mental health. You know, I'm also an entrepreneur in the tourism space, so like trying to manage that, and like, you know, and then plus this, it's just, I think, a lot for everyone. And I'm just hoping that people are not being hard on themselves, right? That's something that we talk about within our group. It's like we've got to give ourselves grace and space to understand that, like, you know, the energy, the emotion, the focus is not really there right now for us to be executing on high level social justice policy. Like it's just, we're not feeling like we're where we want to be, but we have to give ourselves that grace, really.
And that's very fair too. I mean, and I'm glad you're saying that, because I know I often forget to give myself that grace and get to give myself that, you know, that sufficient energy of, you know what, there's a lot going on right now, not just in the world, not just in your world, the world. So
the world, we're in a whole ass pandemic. Like I yell that out like a few times a day. Like I'm just like, we're in a whole ass pandemic. Like sometimes I'm just like, what in the world? Like, it just seems insane, you know? And then we're just expected to be like, okay, well, let's go to the shop and like, let's fill out my QuickBooks spreadsheet. It's just, I don't, you know, and I mean, and we're in a space where generally, like, I'm not fearing for my health and safety every day. Like we have access to, you know, yes, right now our healthcare system is overwhelmed because of the spike we're in, but generally I have access to healthcare. We have access to the vaccine if we want it. Like imagine when you're in countries where that isn't even something that you have access to. And so it's about managing as well that like collective energy and fear, that even if we are not in it every day, like it's still in the air. It's still something that the people that we're talking to on the phone or through the screen or, you know, across the globe, they're experiencing, and we're feeling that energy too. So yeah, it's really, I'm really trying to be kind with myself, but at the same time recognizing what we talked about earlier, which is like, okay, we gotta like be ready to capitalize and leverage and pivot and all this. I know what
right. That's really what the day in the day looks like.
Exactly, just like ice cream me, please. You know? Yeah.
Straight up. Or maybe, and then so with that being said, so how do you decompress? Where are some of your places to hang out, go to eat, like relax, vibe out? Like where do you find a little bit of that piece of heaven, or even like some authentic Bermuda eats or something like that?
Yeah. I mean, as I said, I don't really leave St. George's too much. I'm literally like, this is one of my bottom yard, and just down the hill from here is my shop. So my shop is like 5 minutes away from here. Around my shop are like the main restaurants in St. George's, you know, White Horse, Wahoo's, Tempest, Wharf. So those are the ones we go. That's where I go for drinks. That's where I go for food. It's funny because tourists are always like, well, we want to know where you go. I'm like, girl, the same place you do. Like, these places right here, because I'm not going too far. You know, but I mean, I feel quite lucky to have, you know, lots of outdoor space, and St. George's as well has a lot of outdoor space. So being able to just walk my dog like all around here is definitely a source of peace. She had cut her leg the other day, and then they also, it was really hot, so the vets were telling you not to really walk long distances because the heat's been a lot, but now it's calmed down. Her cut has healed, so I'm excited to get back out walking her every day, because that is a massive part of my peace and self-care routine. We also are very, I feel quite lucky to have a boat. So my husband is the captain. I just supply the drinks and, you know, the food. But yeah, we just go out and we can sit on the boat, go swimming. You know, boating is a huge part of Bermuda life. Like, everybody's renting boats or has boats. It's a huge part of life here. And so, you know, being able to meet up with other friends on their boats, we call those raft ups. Tie up your boats and party on the water, basically. You know, that's a huge part of it. And yeah, just sort of walking and going in and around St. George's. That's pretty much all I do to remind myself of, you know, that I'm a part of that, the legacy of this town. And I walk the streets and I think, oh wow, this street's been here for 400 years, or this building's been here for 200 years. And now I'm walking it, and which of my ancestors walked it, and going to that cemetery that you mentioned, you know, that was a huge spot of peace for me when we were in lockdown. So lockdown is really strict here. You know, we were only allowed outside of our houses walking 1 hour a day. So you couldn't ride a pedal bike, you couldn't be in your car unless you could prove that you were eligible to go to the grocery store that day and that you were going to the grocery store closest to your house. So there were regiment and police checkpoints across the whole island. So it was very, very strict. Everybody was on work from home, unless you were working in the grocery store or the pharmacy, but all the shops, my shop had to close. So being able to walk and go to these historic sites, because they're within an hour from my house, was really important for me, because it reminded me that we have been here and we will continue to be here. And being at that cemetery where you can literally see written on it, it says, you know, died of the prevailing fever, or, you know, this. So understanding like this is not our first epidemic. That the country has survived. These buildings have stood, and we will stand with them. That was a huge part of my peace and acceptance that, okay, we will get through this. So yeah, I've always feel quite lucky to be able to be like, you know what, this building's been here for 300 years. I am sitting here in this building. We will be fine. You know, it's a similar energy that we have around hurricanes. Like, Bermudians are like, blah blah, we got this. You know, we got it.
Right.
Category 4, who cares? You know, we're very, and I think we brought some of that hurricane energy, at least initially, definitely, to the pandemic. Like, burn me strong, we can do this, we face storms, we face this. And we that for me has been definitely a source of strength and hope, for sure.
No, that's heavy. That's real. And you know what's funny? I was having a conversation yesterday in regards to the hurricane that you guys have coming up over the weekend. And she was just like, oh yeah, that's nothing. You know what? We're gonna fill up our bathtubs. We're gonna eat freezer first. We're cool, you know. Like,
and I mean, in this particular case, it has also veered nicely. So we're not even in like the little cone thing, the weather channel cone. We're like, oh, we're out of the cone. It's just gonna be like some breeze. We're good. You know, it's definitely, you know, when I think about the ingenuity of the early Bermudians and how they built the buildings and how they made these, built this very unique architecture
Yeah.
that will withstand a Category 5 storm, is quite remarkable. And so yeah, we're definitely very blessed in that way. And so when a storm is coming, generally our focus is on ensuring we have enough rum. That's I remember my birthday is on Monday.
Okay.
And so there have been not many years where there hasn't been a hurricane in and or around my birthday. It's not always huge. Sometimes it's just a tropical storm, but it's right at the time of year where it's stormy. And so we were home. It was my birthday. It was an actual hurricane. And I was like, we don't have any rum. How did this happen? And my husband was like, oh, well, you've been on like rosé or whatever. So I got that. I was like, but it's a hurricane.
Right.
We have to make dark and stormy. That's the rule. I don't make the rules. That's the rule. So because the storm hadn't like fully come, like it was pouring, it was blustery, but the liquor store was still open. So my beloved husband hopped in the car, drove to the liquor shop.
Loves you, boy. That's what I know.
To get the rum. It was sort of like going around on social media.
Husband of the year.
Always. But he was like, it was going around on social media, like, are there any liquor stores still open? And somebody was like, Churchill's, that's the one. They're like, they never close. And right in the town, in the main like business districts in Bermuda, the electrical wires are underground. Ooh. So they never lose power. Like my shop never loses electricity. Wow. So I guess the guy at the liquor shop was like, well, I might as well just sit here. If people come, cool. If not, Yeah. And so, yeah, he had plenty business because it was blustery early, but the storm didn't come. Like we were off the whole day, but the storm didn't come till like later. So yeah, we went and got our rum. And now that will never happen again. We will never be caught out like that again.
Get caught something again,
right? But yeah, that's generally, even on Twitter now, on Burmese Twitter, it's like, where the hurricane party at? Because sometimes people, especially if they live alone and they're like, oh, I don't want to be, by myself, people will all gather and play games and, drink. I always feel so lucky. And it even gets down to the point where when storms are headed to more vulnerable islands, sometimes I'm like, gosh, I wish that Category 2 or 3 would veer and come our way, because I know that we can take it. There's a joke that like, because in Bermuda we all ride like ride bikes, mopeds, but you deck out, and the key is getting up quick before anybody really sees you, right? And somebody said that's exactly how we are with the hurricane. Like slide out, get up quick, prepare everything before the world notices, because if a storm is even just remotely coming our way, our tourism numbers plummet. Because people who, even if it's not coming to Bermuda, if it's going to another island that begins with B, it impacts us, because people are like, oh, Bermuda has a hurricane. We're like, no, that's Barbuda. That's Bahamas, that's Barbados.
Right.
It's so funny. So from a marketing standpoint, the key for Bermuda is always like making sure everybody knows, like, it's not a big deal. We're A-okay. We're open for business. Please come. So yeah, just get up out of your, like, you decked out, get up before anybody can see you. So yeah, I think it's a category, what is it? Category 4 or 5 now, Sam. Yeah. And it doesn't look like it's coming towards us, but we've got the rum ready just in case, You
gotta stay ready. And when I was like, Hurricane Sam, that sounds too nice.
It's too nice. That was like Larry the other day. We were like, everybody was putting up memes and gifs of Larry David. Like, this is Larry. We're supposed to be afraid of him. It's so funny. I mean, there's not really, Larry, even, we were like, oh, it's coming, and it was nothing, even that. So we're always really, really lucky that generally we don't get direct hits. We just don't, and it's just universal grace and ancestral protection, and the ingenuity of early Bermudian builders to ensure that, even when we get a storm, we never really have loss of life. We never have extensive damage. There'll be, you know, the most damage tends to be marine, so boats get damaged, but not as much with houses and foliage. You know, after a hurricane, it tends to more so impact like our local agriculture. You know, if the trees lose all their flowers, then that impacts bees. You know, so those are the types of things that we definitely have to be concerned about. But we have it's sort of a potion. It's called shark oil, and it's something that fishermen have used for century, where if you take the oil out of the liver of a pup shark on the night of a full moon and you put it on in a vial on the eastern side of your house, it tells the weather. So I know that's a lot, but it is accurate, and it must have something to do with like the barometric pressure of how sharks float and sleep and whatever. I don't know the science, but when the oil is cloudy, it's going to be stormy, and you can see plumes of movement in it when a hurricane is coming. So we just keep an eye on the shark oil and see if the spiders are building their webs down low. You know, sometimes we rely on the old weather prediction techniques to let us know if we actually have a storm coming, because I feel like the International Weather Fraternity, like they just want storms. So they make it sound like it's coming, you should be afraid. And we're like, but the silk spider's web is not that low.
Right. We all right now.
They want to send the guy out so he's blowing in the wind, right?
Right.
And I'm just like, it's we're fine, you know.
Cool.
So we'll be good. You maybe throughout at some point in your life you'll experience a hurricane in Bermuda. It is actually quite. I know some people have it on their bucket list. It is quite sort of, okay, this is something I want to do, because it's a way to experience what is a beautifully poetic and scary moment in relative safety. Watching the waves, watching the wind, you see palm trees bending, you see all of what you're seeing on, you know, when you watch a storm in Florida, but your house is not blowing away, you know, you're not.
No, I'm adding that to my bucket list. I never thought I would run into a storm, but I'm gonna run into this storm. This sounds actually cool, because I actually want to see. I need some shark oil too, so I'm gonna get this.
Yeah, you can buy it in some of the shops at certain times of year. You can buy it, and then you've gotta you know, affix it to the outside of your house on the right, towards the east. And it works. Even the weather, one of the weather channels in Bermuda, their website is sharkoil.bm, because it's our lore around weather prediction.
That's insane. That's so genius. Like, I'm one of those things, like, you're like, how do people even think of this stuff?
I know, it's definitely a bit of magic. I think Bermuda generally is one of I feel it is a very, you know, magical place.
I agree.
So there are some unexplained natural happenings here. I mean, obviously we can talk about the triangle, but there are others too, you know, which it's unexplained, and even from extrapolating out that magic and thinking about it from like an actual natural healing component, like yoga teachers, you know, people who work with crystals, they always talk about like the energy of the island being being very unique. And so, you know, that's something that especially when I'm talking to African American travelers who, you know, I just know existing in America as an African American is a source of anxiety and you know, fear, and there's so much that goes into it, in addition to obviously how there's the incredible culture and history and art and all of that.
Right.
Existing at that level of, you know, anxiety at such a consistent level all the time takes a toll on your mental health. So being able to come to a place where you can let that go, you know, you can, and tap into the healing energies here, I think is also part of my messaging for sure when I'm connecting with African American travelers.
Absolutely. No, that's key. That's imperative. And we talk about the generational trauma and the you know, even And honestly, it's so hard to even look at social media these days because you're
Yeah,
constantly reminded of,
exactly.
what you're going through, what you've been through, what you're, like all of it, right? So that makes, I'm glad you
Yeah,
said that. That makes a big difference in
it
terms of
is.
traveling out
You
there.
know, and we, like I said, we have, obviously we're not immune to, the way that colonialism and racism manifests here, but
Yeah.
I would say generally as a traveler, you're not necessarily feeling or seeing that either, right? So
Mhm.
um I had a friend that I met this summer, so she decided to just come spend like a month in Bermuda. So I met her here. I didn't know her. She teaches online, or she runs an online program for a university in Maryland. And
Yeah.
so because and she has young children, or they're like teenagers, and they were staying with her ex-husband. So she's like, I've got a month. She sort of like Googled like, okay, where could I go, and ended up in Bermuda.
Yeah.
And I met her, and she's now to the point where she's looking to move her family here
Yeah.
for at least a part of next year, because she was talking to me about like sitting at the restaurant down the hill. It's right on the harbor, and there's a bridge, and all day, all evening, young Black boys are diving off of the bridge. So they're jumping, they're seeing who could do the best dive. People, if there's other things happening, you might see somebody be like, okay, $10 for the best dive, or do this. So it's just an ongoing, like, they're just there, they're fishing, they're swimming, they're diving, and it's nothing unusual from me. My son grew up doing the same thing. He's
Yeah.
that was his life. You ride your bike down the hill, you jump off the bridge, you're fishing, you're swimming.
Yeah.
And for her sitting there and just thinking about that freedom
Mm.
that her sons do not know. And
Mm.
she's like, she's got two sons. One, I think, was 16, the other 18. And she's like, they're big boys. They're dark skinned, tall boys. And sometimes my son's like, oh, I'm going to go outside in the, complex and shoot basketball. She's like, not today. My nerves can't take it today.
Right.
Because just this idea of like, your child goes out to play basketball and doesn't come back. And she's like, the freedom that your sons have here, like,
Yep.
you probably don't even realize. And I was like, you're right. My son, he'll be 25 this year, and like, yeah, he just grew up in this neighborhood, hopping on his paddle bike with his fishing line, not
Yep.
coming here with no fish, telling me about fish he did not catch. But
Yeah.
anyway, but yeah, just a freedom. He grew up sailing in this water, and being connected to that history of that long legacy of Black sailing in Bermuda. And
Yeah.
it's just something that I wouldn't say I took for granted, because I always was very happy to be part of the St. George's community, which was a bit different from where I grew up.
Yeah.
And it was a different experience for my son, for sure. But I definitely never lived with that fear, right? Not every day. Yeah, yes, if he's going out at night, he's going clubbing, that
Mhm.
might be a different
Mhm.
thing. I'm worried about, is he going to drink and get on his bike? Is it that, you're worried about those things?
Yeah.
You're worried about some of the gang violence that had sprung up and continues to be an issue here.
Mhm.
But the day to day that I can't trust the adults who are meant to care for him, that I can't trust the police, or that, like, that's not how we feel. And so for her to really vocalize that, like, we're sitting there and she's almost, she's getting tears in her eyes watching these boys just being boys.
Yeah. 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 It's crazy. It's crazy. It's wild. It's wild.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, and I tell people all the time, like during the pandemic, I almost moved to Barbados. It didn't work out, but I was Barbados, Bermuda, and people kept asking me why. I was like,
Yeah.
because I'm allowed to be Black and free here.
Yeah.
I want to have like Black issues. It's okay. You know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
I don't want to get chased down by the police. I'm like, you can scroll on social media and see why I want to move. Like, let's not be crazy.
Yeah.
And so I was like, and to me, still, I want to raise my kids not in the U.S. I want to eventually move to an island, whether it's Bermuda or Barbados. I would love to move and have a home in Africa. Like,
Yeah.
so many options and stuff like that. Right now, while I don't have any kids, utilizing this time to explore, which is kind of what kind of inspired all this travel and stuff now, and also brought me to Bermuda as well. And I said, man, I like Bermuda. I could actually do this. This actually makes sense. If I could find me a house that I could afford.
I know, right? That's the key, right? That's the part, is the expense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the work from Bermuda visa that brought a lot of people, because that's where she is looking to come on that
Yep.
visa, where you work remotely somewhere else anyway, and you're just living in Bermuda. And for her, she was like, what I pay in DC is comparable to what the rents are here, but I also will then have the ocean and I'll have this, so if you live in a major city in America now, the rent is probably comparable to what you pay in Bermuda, to be
Yeah,
honest, New York City prices and things like that. And
absolutely.
so that's what a lot of people are like, well, I might as well come here and just still, do the job. And it really did introduce a lot of Black people to the island,
Hmm.
especially in that New York East Coast region, where they're like Googling, okay, we're safe and close, and they didn't know Bermuda, 90 minutes from JFK. So people, the last year definitely did open up people, Black people especially, their understanding of Bermuda.
Yeah,
And Bermuda Tourism Authority has done, I think, a good job on that, and we've been
yeah.
featured. Like, I think I have a tour with Essence on Friday morning.
Nice.
There's some Essence journalists down, and they were also here earlier this year. So, even in that, in terms of really being able to get the word out, like, we're Black, we're here, you know.
Yeah. 100%. 100%.
Yeah, yep. There's pink sand and Black people, like.
And Black people. No, straight up. I mean, and to the credit of Bermuda Tourism, they showed me such a great time, like an authentic
Oh,
time.
good.
And they, what I mean, it was like there was a lot of Black stuff to do. And I was like, yo, and I was surprised at how many Black people there were. And I was like, man, I
Exactly.
gotta, what I'm saying? I gotta get it in my head. And I was like, there's Black businesses, there's Black people, there's a nightlife. They listen to hip hop. I went to Tobacco Bay.
Okay.
Rusty
Okay.
was playing, and he was going from dance hall to hip hop. He's playing, everything. You get Beanie Man, you get Pop Smoke. And I'm just like, yo, they really get down out here.
We're
I can
here.
do, I can do this.
We're America is the closest. That's our closest landmass. We're
Yeah,
800 miles, or have you, from North Carolina. So
right.
we're greatly influenced by America, but we also have our Caribbean connections. We
Yep.
are people of African descent, so and from West Africa specifically. So even how that moved and how those West African traditions manifest in Bermuda is a key part of our culture. And then as well, that we have Portuguese people, we have English people, we have Native American. There's actually a wide range of cultures here.
Yeah,
And I think that's been that's the story that I think hasn't fully been told.
yeah.
And even when you're sitting in a restaurant and seeing dishes on a menu, you're not necessarily, I think we hadn't necessarily tied it for visitors as to why is this on this menu.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Why is this here? It's how did this food come to be part of Bermuda history and part of Bermuda life, because of the history and the people that brought it. So that I think is the mission, is that when people come, like, they're hearing the story, they're connecting with it, they're understanding, Bermuda's role in the wider diaspora, and feeling more connected to us and to this place, because they can see how it connects back to their lives from wherever they're from.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, that's a real thing. I mean, there's so much to learn. There's so much to do. I thoroughly enjoy Bermuda. I always
Good.
enjoy learning more about it. So yeah, next goal for us is leading the trip out.
Yeah, definitely. And I can help you curate that, of course.
Please, yeah,
But yeah, that's what I love to do. And it's about, connecting with people like yourself that already have a network, and you have a group that want to come on a trip, and really sitting with you and being like, okay, how do we make this trip something that you wouldn't have been able to do on your own, that they wouldn't be able to do if they just traveled here? What are those uniquely Bermudian experiences, and how do we create these bespoke moments, that really showcase what makes this island so special?
absolutely. That's the heart of it. I want people to have such an affinity and attachment to that.
Yeah,
You know what? I'm coming back. As a matter of fact, I'm coming back and I'm calling Kristin, and then I'm coming
exactly.
back and I'm thinking about moving.
Yeah,
Like, that's the goal. I want us to
yeah,
start moving to more Black countries, start being more comfortable, exploring, opening up the, just opening up the world and seeing what we can do, and how we can get out of this generational stress and trauma of the U.S. Because I'm like, man, you know, there's a huge movement of us African American folks that are just like, yo, I'm tired of this.
Yeah.
How, or I don't know where.
And really, and I think I love that it is, you know, that we're having these conversations between the two nations, because I think we also need to make sure it's something even I, you know, want to make sure when I'm traveling to Black and brown countries that I'm not a part of doing what white people have done there, right? So how do we make sure that through movement, through whether that's moving there as an individual or being a part of the tourism, that we're not a part of like a neo-colonial or, you know, space. And so I think having these conversations and built and baked into what we're doing and how we're moving, I think is also key. We want to, you know, I want to make sure that I'm not being a part of further, you know, oppressing a Black person in a different country or a brown person. You know, I want to be sure that if I'm going there, if I'm traveling there or moving there, that I'm, you know, not a part of that legacy of colonialism. So yeah, that's an ongoing conversation that we even have here locally around like how do we balance being in tourism and, you know, making sure that the experiences that we're offering, that the work that we're doing is, you know, it is not a part of pushing a narrative that we've heard before, that it's something different. Absolutely. and it's you know, that it's an authentic partnership and conversation. Because I think, you know, I'm actually writing, I have a web series and I'm gonna start filming it soon, but that is the conversation of what is it to be from a Black or brown country in tourism, with the people that you're generally servicing are white people. And so the conversation and in relation with these folks is layered with race and class and imperialism and like, and how do you navigate that space? So the series is funny, but it is a part of a larger serious conversation that I look forward to having with you in another conversation.
100%. No, you're giving me a lot of food for thought. I've never thought about that, to be honest with you, because, you know, we're so happy to explore and get out that we don't realize that we have the same capacity to hurt somebody like we've been hurt. And I, you know what, that's I love that you said that. And I love that that we can have this dialogue and get these conversations rolling. So yes, I'm looking forward to that conversation as well. That's definitely a growth conversation. That's heavy. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you so much.
Yeah, it was good talk. I'm glad we got all the, you know, Mercury retrograde. She tried it, but
we overcame. So
that's what we do. That's what we Black people, we overcome. We, you know, we ride
every time. So so I appreciate you. I am looking forward to meeting you in person, to, you know, and actually I think in November or December, I'm gonna try and make my way out. I've heard that a Bermudian Christmas is dope. So
it is good. Yeah, definitely. St. George's, I have to always be plugging St. George's. It is the best. It is so beautiful here. The entire town gets lit up. There's lights around everything. It looks like a beautiful like winter wonderland, but on an island. So yeah, make sure you make your way down here, come to my shop, we can hang out and
Oh, 100%. That's gotta happen. That's gotta happen. We gotta have some dark and stormy. We definitely got to. And so where can we find you on social media, website, like email, anything that you feel comfortable giving? Where can everybody get in touch with you?
Yeah, so my personal Instagram is itskristin.com. So that's sort of my online individual personality brand is Kristin.com. So that's what my blog and all of that is under there. And then my business is called Long Story Short. So on Instagram, we're longstoryshort.life. On Facebook, we're longstoryshort.life. And my website is longstoryshort.life. So there's how people can find me.
So I'm gonna drop all of those on our video, on our stream. It's definitely gonna be on our website. And right there. Yeah, we're gonna hook that up. That's
You
perfect.
just watched another episode of Fool's Gold TV. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, and watch out for the next new episode. See you soon.